many of you leaning towards programming? So a lot of undecided, and that's okay. It's quite normal to not know. And to be honest, there's a big need for people who like both, because there aren't a lot of people that like both. Most people either like to code or they like to do network and security. There aren't a lot of folks that find a love of doing both of those. And that's one of the biggest areas growing right now in network security, isn't it? Is a person that can do both. We've started reaching a point where programming is kind of required on more things than just computers. I mean, a good example. How many of y'all are aware of the attack that took place Friday on the internet? Y'all know what I'm talking about? Basically, some hackers took down a third of the internet. And the way they did this was not traditional. They didn't use computers. They did what's called a distributed denial of service attack on a DNS server. And essentially what that means is they use devices to attack these servers that are, what these DNS servers do, they resolve names. And by that I mean, like when you go to a browser and you go to www.google.com, what you're actually doing is going to a DNS server that says Google's IP address is this and this is how I connect. Now what's so interesting about this recent hack is that they didn't use computers to do it. It was actually firmware that was put on printers and other devices that are connected to the internet that was infected at a plant in China. So this attack took place using printers and connected devices, and even some of these like wireless devices that control people's lights at home and echoes and things like that. And basically the hackers came out and said, we did this just to show you we could. We took down a third of the internet, but we could easily take down the entire internet. And right now that's a vulnerability that very well could happen. They wanted to just show that they could do that. So that's the area of stuff that I'm most interested in, is researching stuff like that and then figuring out what can be done to stop it. A little bit about myself. I've been here 2 years now. I came from Bossier Parish Community College, where I worked on a cyber information technology program that's essentially an associate degree to what we have here. Before that, I actually was in industry. It was still education, but I was the network administrator. I started actually as a student here long ago, long ago at this point. And I worked on the Title III labs, which are all the labs over in Kaiser Hall. From there, I moved up to Louisiana Tech, where I was their network administrator. I left there and went to LSU and was there at LSUS and was their administrator for a while. Then I worked at Tech as their administrator for a little bit. And then I moved over kind of to the government side of things and worked at the juvenile court in Shreveport for a little while. That sort of led me back to teaching, and I taught a couple of classes for Bossier Parish Community College face-to-face and really liked it. I think the cool thing to me personally about all of this is I love to learn this stuff, and they pay me to tell y'all about it, which is just kind of awesome. I really enjoy that. So I've got your list of questions up here, but instead of going through them one by one, I just would rather open it up and let y'all ask me questions. So y'all kind of tell me some things that y'all are interested in or want to know about, and we'll just talk about it. Yeah, y'all can just give me the questions y'all ask me. Instead of reading them from the list, let's just do them live.
Okay, just like the attack that went on last week, and also like the emails of one of the presidential candidates being hacked. What are the officials doing? What is the networking doing to resolve that issue? Like, is it getting better or not?
That's a good question, and honestly, the sad answer to that is yes and no. Security of things we have now is getting better. For example, we talk about email. Up until about 2 years ago, most email was sent over the internet in what they call in the clear. And what that means is it wasn't encrypted. If you hooked into a router at the appropriate spot, you could just basically use a program called Wireshark and you could read the emails. You could read passwords, you could read all kinds of things. Think about even though you guys are younger, how much stuff takes place in email. I sold a house recently and we sent PDFs back and forth, to sell that house. If that were unencrypted, I mean, some information was on there. My social was on some of that stuff, things like that. Now more email is encrypted. But what you run into is that a lot of internet technologies are based on the fact that the internet is old, or the technology itself is old. How many of y'all know a little bit about the history of the internet? Have y'all talked about that in any classes? Or
Al Gore.
you'll talk about it in networking. The internet is very old. It was not really designed for what we're doing with it. The original internet was a Department of Defense project. And basically, when they designed it, they really only thought that a few schools and research facilities would be on it. And really, email was the only thing you sent on it. You know, the original creators had no idea that we would do Netflix and YouTube and all these things. So a lot of that technology, because so few people were on it, encryption was something they never thought about. For compatibility, some of those old protocols are still around. Email servers, even today, if they can't make an encrypted connection, will drop to an unencrypted connection to send their email. So from that, things are getting better, but new technologies come out all the time. And anytime something new comes out, there's a whole new realm of security that goes with it. This recent attack, who would have ever thought somebody would have been able to use a printer to take down the internet? So that's a big issue. As new things come out, you have to think about ways that technology is involved in them. How many of you went to Walter Porter last week? You know, she talked about the self-driving cars, which I think is awesome. I mean, that's something that's definitely coming. But think about the security side of that. What if somebody hacks one of those cars and makes it go 100 miles an hour into a brick wall? You know, and that's sad, but it's true. This is something you have to think about.
You can actually,
anytime a new technology comes around, you got to think about how you could protect it.
yeah, you can actually do that already with cars with electronic power steering and electronic throttle controls and stuff.
Yes, you
Especially
can.
new Jeeps.
I have been very lucky to go. There is a conference that happens in the summer called DEFCON. And if any of you ever get a chance to go, it's in Vegas, and it's amazing, and it's awesome, and you learn all kinds of crazy stuff. You also have to pay cash at the door because they don't want a list of people that go to the thing. Because it's a hacking conference. But you gain a wealth of knowledge on this stuff and how it works. And honestly, I say that because if you get into security, you really have to learn to think like a hacker. We're going to try the Certified Ethical Hacking class for the first time next semester. And I'm super excited about it, and I look for things to completely fall apart. But that's how you learn this stuff. You just have to be willing to play with it and get in there and look.
What prereqs do you need for that class, Eddie?
I think for that one, it is 3,400 and 3,980.
Okay.
So for you guys, it'll be a little ways off, but I look for us to keep doing it. I think it's going to be a fun class. And my vision for it is that it's going to be different every time because we're going to look at whatever's going on. Like if it were to happen right now, it would be a lot of research on that hack that took place last week. But I guarantee you, there will be another hack before that class happens. Something else will break.
So you were talking about, and I know I'm not a student, but you were talking about, you know, we're using an old infrastructure, right?
Right.
So the goal of networking at this point is trying to use what we already have, but to protect the new stuff that's coming out. Has there ever been talks of redoing the infrastructure? I mean, are we just too far past that point?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. From a standpoint of the way a network works, we have how many of you know what an IP address is? If I'm talking about an IP, good, most of y'all, great. That's the first chapter of 3,400. You're on your way. Right now, a typical IP address is what's called an IPv4. For example, just one that I happen to know, Google's DNS server is 8.8.8.8. And that's an easy one. And the reason I know that is if you're ever working on a network and you think DNS is down, you can type ping 8.8.8.8, and if you get a response, you're on the internet, you're just having DNS issues. We're eventually going to move from IP4 to what's called IP6. That is definitely going to happen in y'all's career. It's been planned for a while. The reason it hasn't happened so far is the vast expense in doing it. In order to make this move, basically every router and switch and every device on the internet has got to be IP6 ready. And now we're talking millions and billions of devices that are going to have to be updated. Now most of the new stuff coming out is already IP6 ready. Like even the routers y'all are getting at home are IP6 ready. but some of the older stuff is not. And it's not even truly an issue in this country because most of our stuff is updated. But you've got to look at other areas where they're just now getting on the internet. And what's happening is they're getting the old equipment to get on, so it's an issue. That change is the most major change I think that's going to happen in networking in y'all's career. Other than that, it's speed. We're always wanting more speed. The original internet, even on this campus, when they put internet out to the buildings, it was 1.44 megabits. That is super, super slow, just to let y'all know. There's a website, I don't remember the name of it now, but y'all can Google it. It's kind of fun. You put in a website and it tells you how long it would take to download that web page at different speeds. Like at the bottom you've got dial-up, and even NSU's page, which is pretty simple, would take about 8 minutes on dial-up. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Speed is something that I think that's going to continue for a while. One thing I personally kind of look to happen, right now you see the little blue wire coming out of the back of your computers? That's an Ethernet cable, that's a piece of copper. Eventually I look for there to be fiber to the desktop. We already run fiber on the backbones of the networks that connect networks together because it's faster. We're getting to the point where we're getting as fast as copper can handle, so I look for the next change to be fiber to the actual desktops. This IP6 change, the reason for it is that we're running out of IP addresses. You know, in my example, 8.8.8.8, you can only go to 255.255.255.255. And that's a lot. I mean, that's billions of numbers. But we've got billions of devices on the internet now. When this change to IP6 happens, it's truly mind-blowing to me how many IP addresses there will be. The best example that I heard, and I'm not a math person, so this really kind of made it go home. If we were to assign an IP6 address to every atom that makes up the Earth, there would be enough IP addresses left to do 10 more Earths. So theoretically, once this change happens, it will not happen again, especially in your lifetime or mine. It's not going to happen again. What other questions?
I was wondering, what first got you interested in security?
You know what? That's a good question, and the true answer is I don't know. When I was in class here, when it was CIS for me here back in '93, it was just CIS. We had one networking class, and I took that one networking class, and I really liked it. And a lot of the stuff that I learned from there was on my own. I was kind of self-taught. I got into it, and when I started doing the net admin here, I had an opportunity to learn a lot more about it. And I truly feel like I was lucky that most of my jobs were at schools. Schools generally will pay for you to get trained. So I was able to go get training and get my Network Plus and my A Plus and Security Plus and some other certifications that I probably would have had access to had I not been at a school. Nowadays, they're starting to see that certifications are more important. So for those of you that are going into networking, by the way, I strongly encourage y'all to get as many of the certifications as you can. The reason being, those certifications will work for job experience. You're going to get out of here and apply for a job, and even in networking, you're probably going to apply with 50 other people. And you need some things on your resume to set you apart, and one thing that does that is certifications. I like to tell my students, especially the seniors, you got to remember if you're working for a big company, HR is going to look at your resume first. They don't know the first thing about computers, but you know what? They know what A plus means. They know what Net plus means. Those words are going to get you in the pile that will get you into an interview. And in that interview, it'll hopefully be IT people where you can actually talk to them about this stuff. You know, you may be a great candidate, but without those certs, it's quite possible your resume ends up in the trash, just because there's so many people that apply. When it comes to more security stuff, there is a lack of people that are qualified right now. Pardon me, just last week, I saw the federal government has got 22,000 security jobs listed right now. And they're having trouble filling them because there's a lack of people that are qualified to do them.
Which certifications would you recommend?
I would recommend, honestly, 3. The A plus, the Net plus, and the Security plus. If you're only going to get one, it's a toss-up because the Net Plus is the one that we're looking at making mandatory. So when you guys take the 3400 class, it'll probably be a requirement that you take the cert. A Plus, in my opinion, is easier, but it's more expensive. That's why we didn't go with it. The A Plus is actually 2 tests. Now, the next class that a lot of you will take is 2050 hardware, and that's the A Plus test. And basically, it's about putting a computer together, the components of a machine, and loading an operating system on it, basic stuff. If you have the financial means, I suggest you take the A Plus certification. We are a CompTIA Academy, and what that means is any of the CompTIA certs that you want to take while you're a student, you can buy through us for half price. A Plus is $220 for each test for 2 tests. Through us, it's $110 for each of the tests for 2 tests. So think about that, and some of these that you may want to do, you know, even if it's not required in the class, you can do it either before or after, you know. And in all of the networking classes, I give you all the materials to study for them. We just don't make them actually mandatory, and right now it's a price thing. It's tough because I really want you guys to realize what it means when you get out of here. If you get an A Plus, a Net Plus, and a Security Plus, you'll leave here with a job. Right now, CSRA in Shreveport is getting ready to hire 1,500 people, and they've outright told us, I'll hire everybody you graduate with those 3. So,
Done.
yeah, done.
So, what kind of security measures do you take to like stop yourself from being hacked, like your emails and stuff?
A lot of security for basic stuff like that is honestly just a lot of common sense stuff. Don't leave your passwords default. This hack that just happened, most of those printers were unprotected. I hate to admit it, but this campus doesn't have a password on any printer on it. If you knew and because of the nature of the setup, any of these computers can print. If you knew the IP address, you could send something to the president's office printer right now. Things like that are things that have to be thought about and changed. A home user, main things are change the default passwords. How many of y'all got wireless at home? Almost everybody in the class. Nowadays, the routers are better at it. They come with a password built in. But in the old days, you plugged in your wireless router, and it was named Linksys, and the password was admin. People used to not change that stuff. There's a wireless network in my neighborhood named Linksys, and I guarantee you if I tried to log into their router, it's probably admin. Those are things that you can think about. Try to not use things people can find out about you. A very common scam with credit cards is that people use birth dates for PIN numbers. And people think they're smart. They don't use their birth date, but they use their kid's birth date or their spouse's birth date. And all of that is easily acquirable knowledge on the internet. It's always a toss-up between convenience and how much information we want to let be out there about us. If y'all want to do a fun little experiment one day, create a Google Gmail account. Create a new one. Send some email to yourself with just some words in it, like shopping cart, router, computer. Then create yourself a new Facebook account using that Gmail account and start looking, and about the day after, the targeted ads will be things you sent to yourself. Some of y'all might notice that on your normal accounts. I've been looking at cars lately, and I've started seeing ads on Facebook pop up for cars. So Google knows that I'm looking for a car. And what we've got to honestly decide as a society is, are we okay with that or not? Do we like the convenience of this well enough to put up with the lack of privacy or not? Somewhere I read that Google roughly knows about 2 gigabytes of data on everyone right now. On their preferences, on things that they've searched. It's kind of scary, but that's also why when we do a search, they know us. I can put pizza in, and based on what time of day it is, Google will tell me what's open. In the back?
Is there anything that we can do about that to stop the federal government from doing that?
Is there what now?
Is there any way we can do about that to stop the government from doing that to us if we're not cool with it?
The truth is no. I mean, we can try. You can encrypt things, but it's the nature of the internet itself. The only truly way to protect a system 100% now is take it offline. Way back in one of my security classes in grad school, I had a teacher tell me the only way you truly secure a system is turn it off, put it in a lead container, and drop it to the bottom of the ocean. And there's a thing that we teach in security, it's a triangle. And basically this triangle has got security on one side, and usability on one side, and complexity at the top. And if you think about that triangle, everything is a dot. A user's a dot, and as you're moving around, it's how it is. If I make it easier to use, it's less secure. If I make it more complex, it's more secure, but it's harder to use. That is honestly the problem with security. We also teach that it's a chain. Think about a chain like a chain holding up a swing. If you think of security as a chain, that whole chain is what makes it work. But if any of those links are weak, the weakest link will break the chain. In security, it's that way, and unfortunately, the weakest link is almost always humans. No matter what we do, I can come up with the greatest password policy. If I make a 20-character password and it's got to have a number and a letter and an exclamation mark and a star in it, but you write it down under your keyboard, you've defeated my security in one knock. Or you put it on a card and leave it in your purse, something like that. And those things happen on a regular basis. One of the very first things I did at the juvenile court when I worked up there, all of the clerks had the password of subpoena to get onto their system. And I was like, y'all, we can't do this. So I came up with a great little password policy. I thought it was 12 characters in one upper. And I walked back in the clerk's office 2 days later, and everybody had it written down on a Post-it note stuck on the side of their computer. So in truth, I made their system less secure by making them do passwords, because when it was subpoena, at least it wasn't written down. Even though everybody there knew it, not everybody in the world knew it. And that is the mix and the finesse you have to have as a net admin. You have to make things secure, but at the same time, if a system's not usable, then you've defeated the purpose of having it to begin with.
How would you go about testing how secure something is?
There's a lot of ways to test a system. In fact, there's an entire area of security called pen testing or penetration testing. And if I didn't teach for a living, that's probably what I would want to do for a living. You can go through, and with these security pen testers, you actually hire somebody to externally try to break into your system. And the reason for that is sometimes having somebody outside look at it gives you perspective you never have inside. I can build a system and think it's secure because I've done everything I can think of. But having somebody who knows nothing about it look at it from an outside standpoint usually will help you find holes in your system you weren't aware of. And the idea behind this pen testing is you get somebody to do it that's qualified and knows how, and they find the hole before a hacker does. So that way you can plug those holes. And penetration testing now goes beyond just computer. It's not just getting on a computer and hacking. Lots of places go and do quite a bit of surfing where they look through trash cans. Do people throw away passwords? They'll call the secretary and say, hey, I'm from AT&T, I need to get into this system, what's the password? They'll show up. That's an area that nowadays is kind of growing. If I can't get into your system remotely, but I can get your secretary to let me into your server room, then that's an issue. So that's a big area that I think is a lot of fun. When I was at Bossier Parish Community College, they had a group come in and do this at the Air Force Base up there. And I thought it was fascinating. They had one guy that rode a motorcycle, and he faked the badge that you used to get on base. And a lot of the motorcycle riders wear it on their arm so they can just flash it as they're going by. This guy had made a fake one with his grandmother's picture on it. He got on the base for 2 months before anybody stopped him. It's crazy. They also, and part of this pen test, they dressed up like exterminator people. Got the tanks, filled them with water, everything. They got all over that base dressed as exterminators. And I'm picking on that one because I know that, but it's not just at Barksdale. That happens everywhere. If you play the part, if if you look like you belong, people will let you get away with all kinds of things. I've got a friend that does this pen testing for Walmart. And they do, it's kind of a whole package with Walmart. In addition to their networks, they do loss management. And one of his guys went into the Walmart in Ruston, and there was a vest laying there. They wear, put the vest on, went and got a trailer and loaded 11 lawnmowers into it and drove off before anybody noticed. So again, it's if you act the part, you get away with a lot of things.
This might be a tad bit of a dumb question, but I wanted to ask. How would you go about hacking? Like, just hacking in general. Like, yeah, I want to get to this person's computer. How would you do that?
That's a tough question, but really, it all starts with thinking about what vulnerabilities a system has. If you're going to hack a person, like I want to know about a person, one of the first things you do is get out there and find what information you can on the internet about them. If I'm really doing this for a reason, like they're a target, and I'm going to spend some money on it, I'm going to do a public records search. I'm going to look and see if I can find anything about them. I'm going to try to see if they had speeding tickets. I'm going to learn the names of their kids, things like that. Those are the first sets of passwords I'm going to try. If it's a coworker and I can at all do it, I'm going to try to see how many characters their password is. Think about on Windows. This is an issue with Windows and Linux, by the way. You type your password when all y'all logged in. Puts a little dot there so you know that you typed it. Now that's great. That makes you know that you hit the letter. From a hacking standpoint, that means I know if I'm doing a little soldier surfing, it's a rough day today. I know how many characters your password is. Now, if I know how many characters your password is, the number of passwords I have to try gets cut down greatly. If I know it's 6 characters and I notice that you never hit the shift key and you never went up to the number key, I know your password is 6 characters and it's all lowercase. It may take a couple of days, but I could brute force hack that and figure out your password. So little things like that are, and that goes back to our usability thing. On a Linux system, when you type a password, it doesn't show that dot. And that's good from a standpoint of security because I don't know how long your password is. But users hate it because you don't remember for sure if you hit that key. So that's one way. Basically, it's all about what the device is. You just have to think about, from a standpoint of what it is, what ways people might be able to get into it. There's not really this is how you hack. Even in the CEH class, we're going to talk about a lot of things, but truth be told, this area changes so often. It'll be different in a semester. Anytime something gets hacked, security comes out to fix the hole, and then the hackers start over. In the security world, really, you're only one step ahead at all times. Because as soon as you plug a hole, they'll find another one.
I've heard a lot of things about this. I don't know if it's true or not, but they said that there's a malware, like virus, that could be installed in your system without your knowledge, and it monitors what you do and like your password and stuff.
Oh, there are tons and tons and tons of those. In fact, that's one of the ways that they get people nowadays is they try to get them to install something on their computer. A search bar, our coupon printer is my favorite one to talk about because it's going to print coupons for you, but in reality it's gathering all this information about you. In the attack we talked about earlier, the distributed denial of service attack, a traditional one, that's how you would gain access to a computer. I get you to install something on your computer that gives me access to it, and it makes your computer what's called a zombie. And that's a zombie in my botnet. And basically these attacks, the way they happen, a distributed denial of service, is a computer just sending requests to another computer. One-to-one, that's fine. These servers were made to handle lots of traffic. But I can take a system down if I can get, say, 5 million machines to do it, 6 million machines all hitting it at one time. What happens is there's so much traffic going to these sites, they can't tell what's legitimate and what's not. And that's how you shut them down. Anytime you see one of these attacks, things get slow and slow and slow, and then finally they just halt because the systems don't know how to handle it. Thinking about that from a standpoint of here, if I were going to try to attack something, one computer in my office would be nothing, but think about how many labs we got across this campus. If I put software on all the labs that gave me control, then it would be a little bit of a more, attack, more distributed attack. And that's a small example, but that's how it works. If I can get lots of computers out there on the internet to do it. Lots of this malware too just sits on standby until somebody activates it. And the reason they do that is so you don't know it's there. So that leads to one of the very easy pieces of security. Put a virus scanner on your computer and don't disable it. Lots of us, whether we should or not, download stuff off the internet and install it. It tells you to turn off your virus scanners, just don't do it because it's probably not a good idea.
My internet students had a lot of questions about forensics. I don't have my questions up here, but there was a whole section on that. And I wanted to make sure that some of their questions were asked as well, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And this class didn't have many questions on forensics, but it may just be that they didn't know that area as well.
Let's see, okay, in the field of computer forensics, I've heard the terms data mining and data carving used often for someone just beginning their journey in the field of computer information systems. What do these terms mean and how are they used? Okay, so forensics, let's just talk about what forensics is. We've been talking about hacking and stuff like that, but forensics is going in and trying to see what has been done on a system after the fact. Maybe, a lot of it, unfortunately, is child pornography. People are doing things they shouldn't, they get caught, they wipe their system, cops show up, and then you've got to try to figure out what they did. Truth be told, it's good that these people aren't smart, because if they wiped this stuff properly, you'd probably not catch them. So data carving is the process of going in and looking at a system and trying to pull things out, pulling graphics out, seeing where they've been on the internet. When you do something for forensics, especially from a law enforcement standpoint, the first thing you have to do is capture all the data as is. When you go to a crime scene, you're supposed to capture that computer as is. You make what's called a forensic image of it. And basically that is a one-to-one image of their hard drive. If they have a 100 gig hard drive, my image is 100 gig. I even copy the empty space because some people hide things in what's called the slack space of a file, a space at the end of a file. Data carving is just going in and pulling that image apart and looking at it. And in fact, this is why you need huge computers to do forensics. First, you make a copy of their original. You put their original drive up because it's evidence. You've then got a copy. You make a copy of that copy, and then you work on the copy of the copy. You never touch the original or the original copy. The whole time you have to prove that the data has not been altered. And the way we do that in forensics is what's called a hash. A hash basically is just a mathematical formula that you run on a piece of data and it gives a result. And the idea is if I run it on this data and get this result, and then this data and get this result, and the results are the same, I can prove the data was an exact copy because the hash is the same. So basically that's what data carving is. Unfortunately, as sad as it is for some of this stuff to go to court, you've got to document it all. And that's something that we don't do here, but I used to take the class to Bossier City. They've got a big FBI lab up there. They have to document and describe everything that's on that machine for it to go to court. And most people that do this stuff, it's not one count. Most of these people that download this type of stuff, it's like thousands of counts. And they do, they tend to hear the door knock and they'll delete their system, or they'll think they delete their system. So that's one way that, that's data carving. In the age of technology, where more and more information is being both created and transferred to digital material, what does this mean for the field of digital security and computer forensics? That's a good question, because in reality, what's happening now is that as computers get bigger, we've got to have more and more space on these forensics things to store this. Data storage is a big thing in the forensics world, especially for law enforcement. Now, if you're doing forensics for a company, you can set your own data security policies. But the government says that you have to keep this data for so long. If I've locked someone up for child porn, I have to keep that evidence till they're out, because they might appeal the last 30 days of their sentence. and I'd have to go back and prove that. So basically, that's a huge issue. They're trying to figure out how to store this stuff because some of it they just got to keep for so long. And right now, it's honestly, a lot of it's old technology. Put it on tape, and there are just vaults and vaults of this tape that's locked up secure if it's ever needed. I'm heavily involved in cyber forensics. Do you have any training suggestions? In the world of forensics, there is a cert called the CHFI. It stands for Cyber Hacking Forensics Investigator, I think. Don't quote me on that. I'll Google it and see if I'm right. The forensics class that we do, which we'll offer next semester, goes with the CHFI. That is one of those certs, though, that in all honesty, after one class, you're not ready to take. We try to get into it. We get about 7 chapters into the 15-chapter book. A lot of this stuff nowadays, when it comes to security, there's so much of it. It's hard for me, you know, I've said this before, especially to our advisory group. I wish we had you guys for about 400 hours of classes, because there's enough stuff we can teach you. But we don't, so I have to give you all the materials, and then you'll have to do a lot on your own. If security and forensics really interest you, that's what you'll need to do, is take the book and go on after the fact. The beauty of it is, though, that since we're doing the official materials, you'll have it. You'll have the tools if you want to go kind of study on your own.
Thank you. We can open the floor back up to questions. I appreciate it.
No problem.
So what is like a day as a network admin like?
Some days are great. When a network is running, in all honesty, let me use Louisiana Tech. That's a good example. While the network was running at Tech, there were lots of days that I sat in my office and watched TV because everything was actually running. But then when the sky falls, the whole thing breaks. You know, our system ran great up there, but our student system locked up, didn't know what it was doing the first day of the quarter. People are trying to register and they can't get on. And that's when you have to scramble. So from a standpoint of an admin, if you're going into a new place especially, if you put time and research into setting it up right the first time, your job will be a lot easier. But when something breaks, it's usually something major. Around here is a great example. You know, Moodle can go down for a few hours and nobody says anything, but if the internet goes down, people are outside your office with a pitchfork, you know, want to know why the internet's down. That's truth. In some of the smaller places, like when I was at the juvenile, I really liked that job. I had a great title. They called me CIO of the juvenile court, but I was the CIO of a one-man department. That meant I was on call. If something went down with the system in the middle of the night, I was the one they called. One evening, about 3 in the morning, I say evening, it was late, something messed up with the system in the detention center and all the cells opened. Yeah, the door system locked up. And being in a small place like that, you honestly find that you're a jack of all trades. I was the printer broke, the fax machine broke. That day I was the, what do we do now? The jail opened person. Which luckily it was just a reset the computer. Yeah, turn it off and back on. That's the first thing to always try, and that fixed it, because I don't know what I would have done if it had not. But that's kind of also fun to me, is that you don't get bored. You know, you get everything running and it's great, but then there's a problem and you got to figure out what happened and fix it, and then try to figure out and make sure it doesn't happen again.
When you did these things, was it just you? Did you have like a team with you?
At the juvenile court, it was just me. Here we've got 4 people. At Tech we had 6. At LSU we had 3. LSUS we had 3. So it helps to have a little bit of a team. Sometimes though, if it's a small or medium company, it might just be you. At LSU, for example, each of us would take a weekend and we would take the pager for that weekend. And if something happened across the weekend, we had to be where we could get up there and fix it in a couple of hours. The beauty of a school, in all honesty, is most things aren't what I'd say mission critical. If a server had gone down across a weekend at LSUS, the most that would have happened is somebody couldn't get into Moodle for a little while. And that wouldn't have been the end of the world. We'd have sent an announcement and told the faculty, all right, It was down, tell your students, life goes on. But if you're in a business, that means money. An example I like to give everybody is Visa. Think about how many transactions Visa makes every minute. Now imagine if Visa's system were completely down for an hour, how much money that company would lose just by their system being down. So in instances like that, you're going to have a team, but it's also going to be very, very critical that you think about redundancy and all these things that will go into making sure that system absolutely never goes down. We have something called the 5 nines of uptime. And one of you can Google it to give the exact number because I'm sure I'm off. But the 5 nines of uptime means the system is up 99.999% of the time. I believe that lets you be down about 8 minutes a year. So 8 minutes in a year is all you can be down. Some of these ISPs strive for the 6 nines of uptime, which is a couple of seconds a year. And the only way you can achieve that is by having multiple redundant systems all over the place to handle this. Just an example, an easy example. Google uses something called AdSense and AdWords. That's what makes those ads pop up. They read your email and they pull out words, and that's how you get ads on all these other sites. And that's how they make their money. That's why Gmail is free. But it was down a few months ago for an hour. And Google estimated that they lost $100 million in that 1 hour that AdSense wasn't working. Just in ad revenue for 1 hour. So, I mean, it's about money, it is, but these systems are willing to spend money to make sure that they keep things, running.
I heard if you hack into Google and you let them know how you did it, you get a lot of money.
Google is one of those examples. Lots of companies have what are called bounty programs now. And what these are, it makes sense from a business standpoint. The face of a hacker these days is a lot different than it used to be. It's not, the face of corporate IT is different. It's really not somebody in a suit going to an office anymore. And companies are slowly starting to realize that. In the old IT world, we called it the IBM suit. Everybody was in a suit and tie and went to the office. The people that know how to do this stuff aren't going to do that anymore. So a lot of these companies have set up these bounty programs. Facebook's got one as well. I think theirs is 20,000. If you figure out a vulnerability that they don't know about, and you get into their system, you document it, you call their security team, you show them that, they'll write you a check for showing them that hole. And the theory behind that is they'd much rather you do that than you put it out on the black market that there's a security hole. If I figured out, for example, a way to get into Facebook to get passwords out, I got 2 choices. I could tell Facebook, or I could get out on the internet and sell how to do it, or I could perform the hack and then sell the usernames and passwords. And these companies would much rather you give them the information than it get out. Somewhere, and this has been several years, I bet it's more than that now, but I remember in one of the security books it said that when somebody gets a username and password for something like your identity, your credit card account, it roughly costs a company about $8 per person to correct that error. Now think about that if I get into a bank and I get 20 million passwords. Think about how much money I've cost that company because of the things they've got to do then. And especially if it comes to credit cards, because the government requires them to do certain things. If your credit card information's been hacked, they require that you get the company give you new stuff. That they put you on a credit monitoring system for a year. All these things they have to pay for that. So it makes sense for the companies to do that. Lots of them are doing it. Now some, on the other hand, say, no, you hacked our system, we'll send you to jail. And I think that's a mistake on the part of those companies because they're the ones that are going to get hacked next because somebody's going to figure it out and just sell it on the black market instead of going through the right channels with it. Any other questions, y'all? Anything?
When people hack social media accounts and you have to change your password and everything, what's the point of that? What do they get out of that? With hacking your page, I don't understand why.
Usually, with social media, like if I were going to hack one of y'all's accounts, it would be just, for the most part, to show that you can. But in a situation where I'm wanting to know more about someone, a social media account is a first step in. Unfortunately, most people use the same passwords for everything. If you are a CEO of McDonald's and I know your Facebook password, unfortunately, that's probably the same password you use to get into your corporate system. So it's all about gaining knowledge. If I can get into your Facebook account, I can learn about you. Even just public profiles, you can look at, and I'm guilty, I've got a public Facebook page out there. You can look at these pages and you can learn who people are married to and what their dogs' names are and what their kids' names are. And those are things that passwords are made of. For the most part, people use things they're familiar with, especially because we've driven it home, don't write it down, so they think, oh, that's something nobody will know. I'll combine my kid and my dog's name. And that does make it a little harder, but knowing those things, I can put those into a dictionary and start using them as a task. Another thing that people do that is somewhat helpful, but it's not as helpful anymore as it used to be, change a letter to a number. Maybe I'm going to use the password rainbow. I'll change the O to a 0. And that helps, but dictionary attacks now know that people do that. So they will check things like that. If I'm going to run a dictionary attack, it's going to have rainbow, and rainbow with a capital R, and an A and 8, and things like that. The number one way social media, honestly, is still just hacked into is somebody leaves it logged in on a computer somewhere. I haven't noticed it here as much because these auto-log out, but at BIPSI, people used to stay logged into the computers in my lab, and I would send them a message from themselves before I logged them out, just to remind them they need to be careful with that.
So when you were saying about cyber forensics, you say when people commit a bad act, like they wipe their system, does that make the FBI work more harder to gain the information that they think sometimes?
It is, of course, harder if they've wiped their system. If it's a traditional hard drive, when you format a hard drive, unless you did a secure wipe where you wrote zeros over it, all you're really doing is you wipe the table at the front of the hard drive that tells you where files on that hard drive are. So I go in with this data carving, and that's how I recover it. If I recover the table, I can recover the data. Now, when it comes to solid state drives, it's a different world. Because the solid state drive, when you wipe it, it actually just, it's gone. And it's much harder to get back. In situations like that, what they really have to do is rely on records from other places, like ISP records, which ISPs keep records of everything you do, by the way. What websites you've gone to, how long you were there, what you downloaded. You have to rely on things like that to catch somebody. Again, luckily, most of the people that do this stuff are not smart. They're using old machines, old equipment, and that makes it easier to catch. Another thing that the FBI in Shreveport does a lot of, it's kind of sad to know this, but I-20 is a big child trafficking corridor. And they get a lot of information where people have basically bought and sold children from Mexico to Atlanta. And a lot of that information is stuff that they're able to track. They can keep up with it. It's good that people who do stuff like that are not security people, to be honest, because most of that stuff is done unencrypted where it's easy to catch. If these people encrypted all that stuff, it would be much harder to catch. Look at the Silk Road example. They sold prescription meds on there for a very long time, and it took a long time to figure out who was doing what, and there's still a lot of that goes on the internet. There are dark websites you can go to now where you can buy drugs, and they'll give you GPS coordinates, and a drone drops them off out there. And that's how they're trying to, keep from you being able to figure out who it is doing it. And a lot of the government's job is trying to figure that out, and some of it, truthfully, they don't know what to do about. There's just, security is a tough thing because I understand where the government's coming from, even though I disagree with them wholeheartedly on a lot of it. The government wants to know what you're doing in a way to protect you and in a way to monitor you, and that's good and bad. I'm okay with it on some ways, but it's really not their business what I'm doing. On the other hand, the fact that they don't know does make me a little less secure. So, and true security is something that they shouldn't be able to hack, but at the same time, if they, if other people can't do it, they can't either. They can't find out what you're doing, and that's good and bad. And in all honesty, that's a big ethics area that's not answered. It's really going to be up to us as a society to decide what we're going to be okay with in the future. Are we going to be okay with them knowing more about us to make us safer or feel safer or not? And it's a question I don't know the answer to.
So about how much information would you say that Apple has on this? I'm pretty sure most people in here have an Apple product.
Apple fans, how many of y'all got an iPhone? Oh, come on, y'all get a real phone. I should have worn my, I have a shirt of an Android eating an apple. I should have worn that today.
There you go.
My guess would be that Apple knows as much about you as because they share information. These companies compete, but they share information big time. Something that I always found very interesting, if y'all think back, you remember the big Samsung-Apple lawsuit. While that was going on in the foreground, in the background, Samsung makes about 50% of the chips that are in an iPhone. So they're suing each other over here, but they're still, there's a business term for it. What's it, cannibalistic something? I don't know, they don't let me teach business classes, but it's cannibalistic business, I think it is. Where you've got a company that's suing another company, but then in the background they're dependent on each other. That happens a whole lot in the IT world. And when it comes to information, that happens. You've got companies that compete. Google has their Google Plus that nobody really uses, but it's there. It's sort of supposed to compete with Facebook. Yet I guarantee you they share information. Gmail and Apple and all of them. You can do any of these searches I was talking about on any of them, and you'll see it on all the others.
Are you looking forward to the IP addresses going to IPv6 since it's more complex for you and networking?
6 is a little more secure. By default, IP6 has encryption built into it. So from that standpoint, yes, I think it'll be great. From a standpoint of network administration, no, it's going to be a nightmare. I can remember IP addresses right now. NSU's is 192.102.223.2. I don't know why I know that, but I've known it forever. These IP6 addresses are long. They're 128 characters. There's no way that you're going to remember things like that. So from that standpoint, it's going to be a little harder. There's something in networking called subnetting. And I won't get into it with y'all, but basically subnetting is breaking up a network into little networks. And in IP4, you convert the numbers to binary and then convert it back and you get your answer. In 6, you have to do the same thing, but you're converting hexadecimal to binary, and it's these ridiculously long numbers because they're now 128 binary numbers that you've got to convert and then do this process and convert back. If you're doing it by hand, it's really, really painful. So yes and no. I think it's going to be good, but I think the transition is going to be hard. If it's done properly, the consumer should know nothing about it. It should just switch. Because they're going to go to www.google.com and it shouldn't matter to them if it's an IP4 or a 6 address. Right now, some places run both. I know none of the ISPs here do, but if you're in Shreveport, what is it up there, Comcast. Comcast has got IP6 turned on. They're playing around with it. So you can get an IP6 address at home up there. And if you're doing it right, you don't know whether you're going to 4 or 6 when you're typing it in on the domain name.
Do you think that with the change to IP6 that when we transition, if there is any problem, since it being more complex, therefore more harder to get a grasp on, do you think there's going to be more attacks within the transition of IP6?
I would say yes, but I'm going to say no because we're already running it on a lot of places. And I think that most of the security bugs in 6 have been worked out at this point.